In this section, we are going to look at Angular Seed. Angular Seed is a zip file that you download, which acts as a starting point for an Angular application. It was created by the Angular team and basically just gives you a jumping off point for whenever you're going to create your own Angular applications. The Angular Seed has some basic file organization to it, but depending on your preferences, you may want to make some customizations. Angular Seed itself is really detailed towards very small projects with perhaps only a few hundred lines of code. If your project's going to be bigger than that, you'll probably want to create more organization within your project than what Angular Seed gives you. Angular Seed also includes a basic node server that will serve up the files, but that really only works for a simple demo, since there's no data storage included. You'll want to expand the server or switch it out for something more robust. Basically choose whatever your backend of choice is so that you can persist your data. But for just getting started and trying out Angular, the server that they include is really convenient. Here's the URL for the Angular Seed project. Let's browse to that URL and see what it takes to download Angular Seed. Here is Angular Seed's GitHub page. You can see that there's a whole lot of information here about the files that it includes, and a README file that gives you some basic information on using Angular Seed. We're going to skip all this stuff for now and just go ahead and get started by downloading the zip file by clicking this button right here. And now that I got that zip file downloaded, I'm going to want to go and take that and extract it out into a destination directory so that I can start playing around with Angular Seed. Once I've done that, I'm going to open it up in my editor of choice. In this case, it's going to be WebStorm. And let's go ahead and take a look through Angular Seed and see all the pieces that it includes. So I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to first go onto this scripts directory, and we're going to look here. You can see that there's several scripts in here. The first one that I care about is this web server.js. That's that web server I was telling you about. Now, if you're good with Node, you can open this up and start customizing it to meet your needs. But if all you need this for is to serve up your files, there's no reason to worry about customizing it except for one piece. I'm going to open this up. I'm going to show you one important part, and that is the port here. It might be possible that you have this port blocked by something else, in which case you're going to want to be able to change what port this runs on. And so if you need to change the port that this web server runs on, this is where you do it. Let's close this down and look at the other files. We're going to skip Watcher, and we're going to move on to these test scripts. You can see that there's two of them, each with a .sh and a .bat. If you're using the Windows command line, you're going to want to use the BAT files. If you're using a bash shell, you're going to want to use the .sh files. Let's look at the first of these two scripts. That's the e2e-test. This is the script that runs your end-to-end tests. So whenever you want to run your end-to-end tests, all you're going to need to do is call this from the command line. The test file is for running your unit tests. Anytime you want to run your unit tests, you call this from the command line. So let's just run the unit test really quick and see what that looks like. So I'm going to type in scripts, test.sh, and you can't see this because it's happening on my other browser, but it's actually launching Chrome. And you can see now that it has ran all 5 of the unit tests that come built into Angular Seed, and they've all succeeded. Now the other thing you might notice is that it hasn't ended this script. That's because it's actually launched a server, and it's going to watch my files for changes, and every time I change one of my files, it's going to rerun the unit tests. So let's go in and make a change. I'm going to open up test, open up unit, open up this test file. I'm just going to insert a space and then click save. And go back to the command line. You can see that it's actually executed a second time and ran all 5 of my tests, and they are all still passing. This is very convenient. Anytime you're writing tests or changing your code, Testacular will continue to run, and every time you make a change, it will rerun the tests and let you know if you've broken any of your unit tests. Now let's continue our tour of Angular Seed. Since you've already opened up test directory, let's look inside that. You can see that the unit directory contains all of our unit tests. The lib contains all the libraries we use for testing, so we can ignore that. And the e2e folder contains all of our scenarios for end-to-end tests. We'll be looking at these in greater detail in Module 6 on testing, so we're just going to gloss over them for now. Let's close that up, and let's look at the config directory. Config contains 2 files, a configuration file for your unit tests and a configuration file for your end-to-end tests. Since we're going to be looking at testing in more depth in Module 6, we're not going to look at these right now. Let's continue on and look at our app directory. You can see that in the root of this, there's a couple of HTML files, index and index async. The index async is an index file that's set up for using a third-party asynchronous library loader. We're not going to go into that one in this module, but let's look at index HTML. We're we're going to use this as a starting point for our project. This is just a very basic HTML file. You can see that we've got the Angular script file, and the other 5 files here are the default pieces of an Angular application. As your Angular application grows, you may have more pieces than just this, but these are the default pieces that are included in Angular Seed. The app.js is kind of your starting point. The services file contains your services, controllers your controllers, and directives your directives. We've talked about all those pieces already. We haven't talked specifically about filters, but we'll be learning all about those in Module 2. So now that we've seen the index file, let's look at some of these other directories and see what they contain. The partials directory contains your partial files. We'll learn more about those in the routing module. The lib directory contains all of the Angular libraries. The JS directory contains all those pieces of your Angular application. This is where you'll be working primarily as you code up your application. The img is where you can put images. You can see there's none in here by default. And CSS is where we put our CSS files. They've given you one CSS file to start off with, but you'll likely want to expand on that and end up with more CSS files than just this one, depending on your needs of your application. And now that we've looked at the pieces of Angular Seed, let's go ahead and run our Angular Seed project just as it is when we got it, and just see how it looks like without any customization. So go back to our command line, and I'm going to run scripts /web-server.js. And you can see it's now launched my server and it's running it on port 8000. So let's flip over to the browser, and I'm going to put in that URL. You can see that it's just giving me the directories because I actually need to go to that index.html file. So I'm going to browse into app and then click on the index.html file. And this is what the Angular Seed application looks like without any customization. We've got a couple of links up here at the top, view 1 and view 2. If you click on each of those, you'll see a couple of different views. And other than that, there just really isn't much to it. So that's Angular Seed. It's your starting point for creating Angular applications. Of course, you can wire up your own Angular application by hand without using Angular Seed, just by including the Angular library in your project and then building on from there. But if you don't already have something going and you want to get a new little Angular project started, Angular Seed's a really nice place to start off with. And that's what we're going to use in order to do our EventReg application. And we'll see that in the next module, how we customize Angular Seed in order to make it work for EventReg. Let's review with the quiz. When would you not want to use Angular Seed? The times when you wouldn't want to use Angular Seed is when you're incorporating Angular into a pre-existing application, or when you're building a very large application and you already know how you want to organize that application. Then what Angular Seed gives you is its initial organization just isn't going to be very helpful, in which case you'd want to just start out from scratch. Which directory contains the files that you will be customizing as you build your Angular application? All the files that you'll be customizing are inside the app directory in Angular Seed. Which file would you change to run the server on port 9000? The port is specified inside of the webserver.js file, so if you need to customize that and run it on a different port, that's the file that you'll need to change.